This is my current training program. You'll notice that it's split into two sections when I'm on nights, which are 12-hour shifts, and then my off days. Chest and tries, back and bis, legs, delts and arms off, upper, and then lower, which is legs repeated, and then another off day before restarting that cycle. But we're going to talk more in depth about these four sessions in particular, because they're a real true representation of workout minimalism. So in this video, I'm going to go over the exercises, what I'm doing to kind of make this program work for me. Now, if I'm, as a advanced level lifter, seeing really good results on a program like this, then you can expect to see better results if you're a beginner or an intermediate. Don't underestimate the progress that you can get with a minimal amount of work, assuming that you follow a few basic rules and you're training with enough intensity. So we're going to look at each session. We're going to start off with chest and tries, which is one of my favourite workouts. Very short. As I said, I'm in the gym for less than 30 minutes. It needs to be that way. It's not through choice. I have to train with a very limited kind of time spent in the gym on these 4 days, because it's just hard to kind of balance everything. And this is what I have to do. So I have to make it work for me. How am I doing that? Okay, let's look at the session. So we're starting off with the dips. Now, dips are one of the most underrated chest movements out there. Whether you're doing traditional style parallel bar dips or a machine, they're a fantastic movement for developing thick chest and very, very good triceps. It's in the consolidation routine. For those of you who don't know, it's Mike Mentzer's third edition of the consolidation routine, featuring 4 exercises. It's one of those movements for good reason. The stimulus that you're going to get in your pecs and front delts and triceps is staggering. So that is in my routine to start, and it's very heavy, working somewhere between, say, 5 and 7 reps. Then I move on to my second movement, which juxtaposes the dips very nicely. So if you're training with minimalism in mind, you need to think about how exercises really work together, how they kind of supplement one another. An incline is obviously a perfect kind of match for the decline movement. Again, it's heavy. I do a few warm-ups with very low reps to kind of get myself mentally and physically ready for the set, and I go all out. Again, working in that 5 to 7 rep bracket if I can, using mini plates to carefully and slowly, progressively overload the lift while staying in that target rep range. Now, this was actually quite a poor week. I was very fatigued, had a little less sleep than usual. I had actually even less time than I usually would, so I had to kind of mix around some of the movements. I got it in eventually across the week, but it was quite atypical in how I managed to do that, and that kind of affected, I think, my performance across the board. Notice some of the reps dropped just a little bit more than I was kind of anticipating, but still overall good progress. Took the weight up, across the board on most movements. And I expect, next week to be even better. So then after the chest work is done, that's all I do for chest on this day. I move on to my tricep work, which is very important. I want bigger arms, so I need to hit triceps. And my first movement is the JM press. Now, you can perform this in different ways. There are lots of different videos you can watch online where they perform the exercise in slightly different styles. This is the way that I'm doing it. This is the way that I like to do it. Feels good. So essentially, it's a hybrid between a close grip bench and a skull crusher. You're kind of meeting both of those movements halfway, so the weight is going to be less than you would on a close grip, but slightly more on the extension-based movement. And it's a nice kind of hybrid-based strength movement, and therefore it works very well with low reps. So again, following the same principle, maybe slightly higher, say 6 to 10, working in that range and just trying to progressively overload that lift up to about 61 kilos here. So pretty good, nothing crazy, but it's seen some good progress. Now, if I can get that up, I'm really confident that my triceps will get a lot thicker. I can really feel them working quite nicely on this movement. And then if I have time, which I didn't during this week, I'll then do a single arm kind of rope-based, so hammer, neutral grip, based push-down movement, which will supplement that jam press very nicely. So if ever you're in a rush and you need to kind of condense your workout down, you need to have a plan of action. What exercises are you going to take out if that's the case? So for me, it's the third one. The rope push down is less important than those first 3 for me at the moment, because I'm doing push downs on my upper day. So if I have to, I'll take out that last one, and that's something you need to think about if you ever have less time than you would like in the gym. What exercises need to stay, what exercises need to go. So now moving on to the second day, which is back and biceps. Again, 2 main back movements. That's what I'm doing at the moment. We're starting off with the chest supported T-bar rows. It's working really, really well for me. And it's a great exercise to perform because it's fixed. That means it works very well for progressive overload because you're not allowing yourself to use a little bit more momentum with, say, the bent row. The bent row is a great exercise, but it can be a little bit difficult to progressively overload because you can just continue to add momentum, add kind of more kinetic energy into that lift via your legs to artificially inflate those numbers. With this, you don't have that option. So it's a really good movement to work on. It's my staple movement at the moment for the kind of upper back. Then I move on to my lat pull down, and again this supplements the T-bar row very nicely. This is more lat dominant and allows me to hit that area as opposed to kind of the upper back. I like the underhand grip personally, the close grip pull downs. Again, this is in the consolidation routine. It's one of those 4 movements that Mike Mentzer chose for his abbreviated routine. But unfortunately, because of golfer's elbow, and that's pain in the inner elbow, for those of you that don't know, very, very common. It's just really difficult to do, and I'm not, going to, potentially make it worse by stubbornly sticking to a movement that causes pain. So I've chosen to do overhand instead from this grip, which hurts a lot less. So it's something for you to bear in mind, guys. If you have inner elbow pain, overhand movements or pronated movements will work a lot better for you. They'll be a lot less painful. So nice and heavy again, and I really try not to lean back on this. If you lean back too much, and actually I kind of caught myself on those first few reps, leaning back a little bit too much on those last few, you'll notice that I was a little bit more upright. If you lean back too much, essentially you're replicating a bent row movement. If you think about the body position in relation to the weight. So with the pull downs, I really want to try to stay upright and kind of act as if I'm doing a chin up. And as I do a chin up, I pull my chest kind of up, and then I'm almost kind of pulling forward slightly to get the chin above the bar. That's a really kind of true, strict chin up movement, and that is going to hit the lats very, very nicely when you're kind of upright. And you can see on the clip there, added in a couple of partials as well. So that's my main back stuff that I do on that day. Pretty quick again, and then I move on to the bicep stuff. Now, I'm really hitting the preacher curls with the easy bar hard at the moment. I do these 3 times a week, believe it or not. And I feel that it's paying off very nicely. Again, it's a great exercise to do for progressive overload because it's consistent in how you perform it. There's no real leverages or momentum involved. So you can go into the gym knowing that each and every session you're more or less doing the same form. As good of an exercise as barbell curl is, if you add weight incrementally, you might just be leaning back a little bit more every time. Now, there are ways around that, of course, with discipline and maybe leaning against a pole or a rack or a mirror. But I'm using the preacher bench rather, and it feels great for me at the moment. Now, this point is really, really important, and I can't remember where I read it. Years ago, I think perhaps the early Max OT literature, but it stated that if you can get a pump doing low reps, you're onto a winner. It's really, really good. It provides feedback that you're doing that exercise right. Now, we know that performing low reps is slightly more technically difficult than high reps, and that's why kind of people maybe move away from that and perform, say, sets of, say, 8 to 12 more consistently because of the ease of execution and the progressive overload that entails. But if you're doing a set of 5 or 6 and you get a really good kind of feeling from that, a subtle pump in the area that you're trying to train, then it's a great cue to you, great kind of feedback that you are successfully targeting that musculature with the exercise you're doing. And then over time, if you apply progressive overload to that and continue to get that feedback, that effort, that grind over time is providing essentially more stimulus for growth to that target area. So it's really, really, really good news if that happens. And for the preacher curl, for me, I only need to do a set of 4 or 5, and I really feel it in my biceps. So I'm going to stick with these, really enjoying these at the moment. So then I move on to my second exercise. Sometimes if I have enough time, this is the same concept as the first session. If I have time, I perform a rope-based curl movement or a hammer curl. And again, didn't have the time to do it for this session, so I omitted it from the workout. That's the exercise that goes if I'm down on time, if I don't have 5 to 10 minutes to do that. And that's how I basically work this program. The real basic core movements stay in, and then depending on the time that I have, I might add in 1 or 2 more movements. So now working on the legs. Legs is a very simple session. It's 4 exercises, and I repeat this session on my lower body day on my off days when I'm not on the night shift cycle. I start off with a horizontal leg press, and I'm seeing really good returns from these. All that effort, all that kind of energy that I'm putting into this lift is focused on the quads. Now, as much of a good exercise that squats are, and as much as I love them, and I've spent so much time and energy getting better at the squat, my best on the squat was about 210 kilos, 180 for good comfortable sets of 5, 140k for 20, and I'm not naturally blessed at squatting. I don't have the best mobility. I'm 6 foot. It didn't come easy for me, but I made it one of my best lifts, if not the best, through hard work and effort. But it's very difficult to kind of target that stimulus on the quads. The bottleneck tends to be the core, the lower back. If you're going to kind of fail a rep, that's where you're going to fail. It's just a lot of work. I've made videos about this in the past, the potential negatives of the squat. And I find that the horizontal leg press works so well. It's easy to perform. It's easy to warm up. It's comfortable. I don't get any joint pains or joint aches. My lower back's safe. And it really, really hits the quads hard. So use a lower foot stance, a nice narrow grip. Don't go too wide, guys. Don't follow the kind of the mainstream of leg press execution at the moment, which is to kind of let those knees go right down to increase range of motion. It's a buzzword at the moment, increase your ROM. It's not always a good thing. By doing that, you then place a little bit more emphasis on the hips, the kind of glute area, as opposed, or the adductors, as opposed to the actual quads. By keeping it nice and narrow and allowing your knees to track straight down towards your chest, you're going to feel it a lot more in your quads, I guarantee you. You're a real nice close grip. It just feels fantastic for me. So again, really low reps, working on progressive overload. The weights come up quite nicely on this one. I then follow it up with quad extensions, my second quad-based movement. Same kind of principle. Don't be scared of going too low on the reps on the quad extensions. It works just the same as any other exercise, and that's very effectively. And I can use my mini plates to kind of bridge the gap between the plates on this exercise. This machine's very good because it allows for a bit more stretch at the bottom. I feel it in the quads a little bit more than some of the other movements that I've done in the past. Then onto my hamstring work, and it's exactly the same plan as the quad extensions, nice low reps. These were both quite successful in that I matched my reps with a little bit more weight. You can see the mini plates on this hamstring curl set, 0.5 in addition to what I did last week. Actually, this is the second set because the first set I didn't record. The first set I got 8 reps. This set is the second set just to kind of show you guys how I do it. And yeah, it was still a pretty good set. Now onto the calves, the last exercise on my leg day. It's seated calves. For me, this feels really good. It's easy to set up. It's quick to set up. It's not really used that frequently, so I can kind of mostly get on it. And when I'm in a rush, I need to be able to pick movements that I know I can get on quickly. And it's not always possible, but the standing leg raise, or the Smith machine for sure, is going to be busier. And that's why I've chosen the seated. It works really well. It gets a bad rep, but honestly, seated calves great. Up to a pretty decent load now. I'm going to, as you see, have to start stacking weights on the top. Range of motion, I think, probably a little bit short on this one, as you can see, but I don't think it's a massive cause for concern. It feels so good. And again, as I said before, getting that kind of feedback, that pump from doing quite low reps is always going to be a good thing. And that's my leg day. Then I'm going to finish up with shoulders and triceps before I move on to the second kind of phase of my training program. This is another opportunity to train arms, obviously splitting biceps and triceps into the first 2 sessions. This way I amalgamate my arm training into the last kind of mini session I do before my off days. So it's a fun session. I enjoy this one. It's going into that last kind of night shift as well, so feeling kind of quite excited about finishing. It's just a nice fun time in the gym. So I start off with my machine shoulder press. Now the reason for this is that, number one, it's an underused piece of equipment in the gym. I can always get on it usually. Number two, it's easy to progressively overload. I can use mini plates on the plates. The pin is quite long. That works out great, and it's a nice comfortable machine that feels good for me. I can set the bench up nicely so the range of motion is good. It just feels good, and that's sometimes all that matters. So yeah, up to a decent weight on this. It's seen some good progress over the last few weeks, and again following the same kind of principles as I am on my other movements, around that 5 to 7 rep mark. trying to stay in that bracket and just continuously adding small increments. Now, if I find myself where the reps have kind of dropped a little bit lower, which I mentioned did kind of happen on this week, then I have to be patient for next week, attack it with a little bit more vigour, eat a bit more food, try and go into it maybe a little bit more well rested, and hopefully I can grind out another rep and push me back into that kind of bracket that I'm looking to achieve. If that doesn't happen, then I need to kind of wait a little bit more, try not to add in any more weight, no more progressive overload for another couple of weeks, and just see what happens. And then essentially, depending on the feedback, I'll then decide what to do. I may need to just drop that weight off a little bit. Perhaps it's come up too quickly. Perhaps I've been overzealous. But usually it's just more fatigue over the course of that week and not enough food or a drop in body weight perhaps that causes that kind of drop in your performance, from one week to another. So yeah, good progress on this one, again using the mini plates. And I move on to my second exercise, which I do, which is the side cable raises. Really enjoying these at the moment. Again, quite low reps using the mini plates, which is very, very important on movements like this because you're not going to be able to go up a plate from session to session. You're not even going to get close, so forget about it. Your form is going to take too much of a hit if you do that. And even with the side raises I'm doing here, I would prefer it if my hand was kind of a little bit straighter. You can see that I'm coming up higher, so it's taking a little bit tension off the lateral head and placing it onto the front to make that easier. Your body will always try and find that easiest route. It will always try to do that, and it's your job as a lifter to be very disciplined and keep the form consistent. So I'm going to have to stay at this weight for a little bit longer and just work on kind of that form, really trying to get that focus on the lateral head by keeping the pinky up. And now if I have time, again, this is the movement that I kind of manipulate depending on the time availability. I'll do front and rear delt raises, and I can touch on these more on my upper body session where I have a little bit more time. So it depends on what I'm doing on that day as to whether I do these or not. But essentially I'll use the rope to do the front head and cable crossovers for the rear delts, and enjoy both of those movements. Now the arm work, again, very, very simple. It's just preacher curls again and overhead extensions. Overhead extension supplements the JM press and the single arm push down if I did it very, very well. It's that heavy kind of overhead movement which is so important. I think you have to have some kind of overhead movement in your tricep work somewhere. And it's really good because I can use the same apparatus on these two. I can kind of almost superset, and essentially I do. I give myself plenty of rest between each working set, but I warm up as supersets, so I can get these two done quite quickly. And again, very, very low reps, working in ideally the 5 to 7 rep mark. Here you'll notice that the reps just drop that little bit lower. As I said before, it's due to more fatigue and actually adding weight from the session before, so that kind of coincided with that fatigue to create that drop in reps that was slightly under the target I made before. But I'm confident next week, going into that with a bit more rest, should be back up into the target zone that I want. That's my 4 days of training, guys. Really simple. As I said, I'm never in the gym for more than 30 minutes. It's always quick training, and I really, really enjoy it. It's not, too mentally overwhelming to train with high frequency when the session length is short. But essentially, this is an example of proper workout minimalism and how I'm making it work for me.